Kevin Sullivan feeds over first, and I go to hit him with it, expecting it to dent like a garbage can, and it goes kadunk, and Kevin just goes yank. It was made of fiberglass, right? And I hit him with it, and he just sunk right down.
We are going to go back to 1993 again, ECW. Now, I don't think, I mean, you'll know, I know you'll know this, but I'm not sure how many people know that Terry Funk, obviously the most famous championship win in ECW, was barely legal. We discussed that over the course of several episodes. But Terry Funk is actually a two-time ECW champion if you count Eastern Championship Wrestling, which of course we do. Now, I am completely confused as to why the reasoning is. I'm hoping you can tell me why. So, Terry Funk defeats Sabu December 26th, 1993 at an event called Holiday Hell. Mm-hmm. And then he ends up losing the belt a few months later, necessitating a tournament for the NWA title that you win and then the belt throw down, etc. We'll get into that story for another episode. It deserves its own episode, I'm sure. What was the in-between point where Terry Funk wins the title and then loses the title, and then where does the NWA title come into all this? It's a really confusing time for the belt.
Yeah, it was. In fact, a lot of that is made-up history. Me winning the title, I think in the books, says from Tito Santana. Mm-hmm. Tito was gone by then. Tito and I never, in fact, worked in ECW. There was a show. Now, remember, I'm teaching school 5 days a week at this point. I had gotten onto the plane, and the show is in Valley Forge. So my car is waiting for me at the Philadelphia airport. I had to go into the bathroom. You can imagine this, everybody's been on a plane. The bathroom's this big, and get changed out of my teacher clothes into my wrestling gear. And you can imagine walking up the hours going, who the hell's this guy? Like, where'd this clown come from, you know? And I get off the plane and jump in the car and drive straight there. Well, they're having a weapons battle royal for the title. And it's funny you had mentioned the one thing, and I'll bring it up again here in a different capacity. So I get to the building, the match has started. You know, they're already out there. So I'm looking around. Well, everything's picked over. There's like no weapons around anywhere. I go out and try to break a branch off of a tree, and I need something to go to the ring with. They're 15 minutes into the match, and it's a steel cage, as I remember. I finally look, and there's an ashtray over in the corner. So I go over and I pull the metal part off the top, and there's like a tube, but about 12 inches around. And I'm assuming it's just made of like thin tin or something. So I go running down to the ring with this, the only thing I could find, and Kevin Sullivan feeds over first, and I go to hit him with it, expecting it to dent like a garbage can, and it goes kadunk, and Kevin just goes yank. It was made of fiberglass, right? And I hit him with it, and he just sunk right down. The finish of that match was me putting a bag over Terry Funk's head and like basically strangulating him to take the belt. Now, I don't know if that's the segue from the belt to the belt into the tournament. The NWA title came into it. Eastern Championship Wrestling was technically a part of the NWA. Mm-hmm. And we were the only NWA entity that by that time could sell a building out, draw a crowd. And so they came up with the idea basically to use ECW, basically for ECW to commit Harry Carey. So you guys flay yourselves and then help us get this back over. So we'll just transition ECW into the NWA, and you guys all come to work for us. Well, there was no, like I said in the promo, died 7 years before, RIP. So that's where Paul and Todd had grafted the idea, of doing this belt throwdown. And for me, the best part of that was how Paul handled me in booking. Now, I'm sure Paul probably sort of knew my psyche and knew I'd probably go for the most controversial thing. But Paul never said, you win, you lose. You're going to do this, do that. He would give me a range of options to do and allow me, the option to do that. And so that's where the whole NWA belt comes into the thing.
Well, and apologies for interrupting. So specifically, I also want to describe it. So the old Eastern heavyweight title belt was had like a little blue square in it.
Yes, it was Pennsylvania.
And so where did Terry Funk lose it then? That's the weird thing.
At that Valley Forge match, I think, is because again, it gets a lot of this is made up history, Yeah. So I know we had the match in Philadelphia, and I know it was Terry and I at the end. because that night is the night where me and Sherry Martel and my bodyguard,
Curtis Hughes, was it?
Curtis Hughes, yes. There's that picture of us sitting in the dressing room.
The memorable Curtis Hughes.
Yes, but he was great. He's a great guy. Yeah, and there's that picture of us, him standing over top of me and me sitting there with the belt in the Valley Forge dressing room and Sherry behind me. That was all taken that night. So again, this history of, I never wrestled Tito, but I beat him for the belt. Then Terry gets the title from Sabu, and then we have to segue it back in a way to arch this back to Terry for what's coming up when we eventually get to Barely Legal. Again, looking back, it shows you the deftness of Paul and brashness, really, of his booking, to make the assumption that you just make up history and say, okay, this match happened in such and such a place and so beat so-and-so. And that the fans, like, I've never been asked by a fan, like, the question, well, that wasn't real. So, like, where did like, this is the first time we're addressing, I've ever addressed this that I can recall, that there's that early history that's a sort of like fuzzy and and then all of a sudden, bam, now you have these guys and they're pursuing. But it really was ballsy by Paul to take that chance, because even then, without the internet had been started, but it was in its infancy. You didn't have social media like you have today and everything. But fans were, especially those hardcore fans, would go back and look into this stuff and research it, and like make the assumptions. They wouldn't just make the assumption that what they were being told. There was always some fan going, yeah, but hey, I know this didn't happen. I'd never been asked that. So he was able to somehow get the wrestling audience to swallow and digest that fake history. And I think because what ECW became, and as magnetic as it became, and what the fans were seeing, they were willing to, okay, well, that was before I started coming. So, like, I'm just going to pay attention. Like, this is the real history. And the one big noticeable difference, if you paid attention, was when I had the Eastern Championship belt, I would always call it the heavyweight title. We would never call it a world title. That was the whole purpose of the NWA tournament and the Swerve, was to now, we're wrestling still in the same buildings and everything, but it's now a world title. And it's, again, nobody's ever challenged that, so it's, we're wrestling in, part of the country, hardly worldwide. But, it worked again. I don't think today that you could get away with a lot of that stuff, because there would certainly be something going, yeah, but all the naysayers on social media. But at that time, Paul was able to just create fake history